Hey y'all, glad you're here. Come on, stand up with us. Yay.
Everyone's got a hill to climb, and I know yours ain't mine, but I'll help you to get there if I can. We all have a song to sing, 10,000 little things. You show me yours and I'll sing the chorus. No matter where you go, if you feel alone, I'll help you to get there if I can. And if you fall back down and I'm not around, I'll pick you up again and I'll help you to get there if I can.
Everyone's gotta learn to fly. If your wings are broke like mine, I'll help you to get there if I can. Everyone's gotta cross the bear. We all know life ain't fair. I'll pick you up, you'll keep on going. No matter where you go, if you feel alone, I'll help you to get there if I can. If you fall back down and I am not around, I'll pick you up again. I'll help you to get there if I can. Cause when I'm hurting, I feel I don't deserve it, and all my big plans fall through. Oh, I'm gonna need you to help me to get there too. No matter where you go, if you feel alone, I'll help you to get there if I can. And if you fall back down and I am not around, I'll pick you up again and I'll help you to get there if I can. I'll help you to get there if I can. Y'all can have a seat.
Hello, Grace Point. This is Chantel Wilson here. I'm joining you virtually from my hometown in Roseville, Maryland, which is about 30 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. I'm here today to welcome you all to the service, whether you're online like me or in person at 3rd and Lindsley. We're so glad you joined us today, and we want you to know that in this space, you are loved, you are celebrated, and you are affirmed. So please stay safe, you all, and hope you enjoy the service.
We want to start something back up today that we love doing here at Grace Point. We think it's okay. Now, if you have reservations about meeting and hugging and high-fiving and all that, for sure, just let people know that. But we do want to offer you the opportunity to meet someone, talk to somebody, keep your safe distance, but introduce yourself to somebody and see how their week is right now. Meet somebody new. Go ahead. We want y'all to stay up for this one too, if y'all don't mind. And as much as you can, sing along with this beautiful song.
I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. And then you came along. You put me back together. And every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Yeah.
Oh, there's nothing,
Yeah. Better than this. Oh, there's nothing better than this. Oh, there's nothing. And nothing is better than this. Yeah. Oh, I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Church, you've seen them all, but you still call me friend. Yeah, it's the God of the mountain. It's still God of the valley. And there's not a place your mercy and grace can't find me again. Yeah. Oh no, there's nothing better than this. Oh, there's nothing better than this. Oh, there's nothing, and nothing is better than this.
Come on, let's sing that again. There's nothing better than this.
Oh, there's nothing
This right here.
better than this. Oh, there's nothing better than this. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than this. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn mourning to dancing. You turn beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. Oh, there's nothing better than this. Oh, there's nothing better than this. Oh, there's nothing is better than this. Oh, there's nothing better than this. Oh, there's nothing better than this. Oh, there's nothing is better than
Amen. You all can be seated. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Emily Wire, and I have a few announcements for you today. First of all, as you have noticed, we have tried to go as paperless as possible. So if you take your phone and you scan the QR code that is on your table or up on the screen behind me, then you can find all of the information on any buttons that I talk about. First, we wanted to take a moment to acknowledge our online community. Can we give them a hand? So LC recommendations, which is the Leadership Council, are open from now until next Sunday, October 31st, which is Halloween. And if you think you know someone who would be a good fit for the Leadership Council, there are just 2 qualifications. The first is that they have attended GP for at least 12 months. And then the second one is that they do not have a partner or a family member who is currently on staff or on the LC. If you would like to submit a recommendation, you can find an informational video, and you can also email lc@gracepoint.net. Volunteers are needed for both the band and hospitality. If you're a musician, you can follow the band volunteer form. And if you're anything else, like right now we need announcement people, we need load-in people, and load-out people. You can follow the general volunteer form button. Hopefully you had this on your calendar already, but today is our Diskin Cider event. We will be there from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. It's a family-friendly and a dog-friendly event. They have a small menu and non-alcoholic options for those who don't drink, and it's just going to be a really nice, casual opportunity to finally get to talk and meet some of the people in our community. You may remember a couple of months ago that Kat Armis, author of Abuelita Faith, came and spoke here in August. She was also very pregnant, if you remember that, and we're excited to announce that she and Taylor Burrington had their first baby girl. Her name is Rio. So as members of our community, we wanted to contribute to their meal train as their first few weeks as a family of 3. If you're interested in signing up for that and you want the dietary restrictions and drop-off information, then you can follow the Kat Armis Meal Train button. And next, we thank you for your continued support. You can give in 3 ways. You can text GracePoint to 77977. You can go to gracepoint.net/give, and you can also use the QR code. And now, it is my pleasure to invite Dr. Kathleen Kunkel to the stage. She is the founder of our Q4 InReach, Love on Wheels. And you can learn everything that you hear about today and more at our InReach button. Dr. Kunkel, everyone.
Thank you so much for inviting our organization here today. It really is so heartwarming to meet all of you guys, and wow, that worship band is amazing. So thank you so much. So Love on Wheels. So we're a nonprofit organization based in Franklin, and we serve children in the foster care system. People often ask me how this whole idea came to fruition, and it all started, my husband, who's here today with me, we entered the PATH classes to become foster parents, and either the 3rd or 4th class, they showed us a video of this 8-year-old young man being handed a black trash bag by a police officer saying, "Hey buddy, you got 10 minutes, get your stuff." And I couldn't bear the thought. And of course he didn't think of getting important things like underwear or socks or his school supplies, So that night when my husband and I got in the car, I told him, I said, "Buckle up, buddy." And he said, "I am buckled." And I said, "Oh no, in life." And he said, "Oh God, who are you gonna help now?" And I said, "Are you going to be able to sleep at night knowing that children, deserving, wonderful children, God's kids, are being given a bag of trash for the first moment of being entered into the foster care system, subconsciously, non-verbally being told they're trash?" I said, I can't sleep, so you're not going to be able to sleep either. So we're going to have to figure out a way to do something. So we thought and prayed about it and came up with the idea of providing them with diaper bags, duffel bags, backpacks, and suitcases full of basic necessities. And I literally sat on the idea for about 2 years and finally told my pastor, and so he said, "Why aren't you doing it?" And I said, "Because I'm just a veterinarian, And he said, "Why aren't you doing it?" And I said, I'm telling you, I don't know anything. And he said, why aren't you doing it? And he literally, every time he saw me, why aren't you doing it? And I realized he was right. I could learn how and to, navigate through the nonprofit, arena and learn more and more about the foster care system. And so that's how Love on Wheels was born. So we are literally in the back of my animal hospital in Franklin. So if any of you guys have critters and live anywhere near the Grassland area, please support our Little House Animal Hospital, because a portion of every single dollar that comes in the door goes to foster kids. So the current state of the foster care system is, across the nation, it's a pretty poor description of the word care. We're really not doing these children a service. We're trying. Every state is trying in their own way. And believe me, there are thousands and thousands of people working tirelessly to help children in the foster care system. And there are fabulous foster parents. There are. But there's so much that isn't done. So much. Think about that. These kids are being taken from the only family they've ever known. It is a shock. It is a horrible event for them, even if the family that they're in is not a healthy one. And they're often moved from place to place. And they're typically moved from the town where they live, the school that they are attending. Williamson County is one of the wealthiest counties in the state, and we have the fewest number of foster families. So kids in foster care in Franklin are often moved to Fentress County or, Knoxville. You'd be amazed. And picture that a person that is working for the foster care system for the state, they have to meet with every single child twice a month, and the children are spread out across the state. So, a young person just coming out of college, all excited about working and serving foster kids, are spending half their time or more than half their time driving across the state just to visit with them for a few minutes, and that's all they have time for. It's a broken system. So in the state of Tennessee, we're very lucky that Jimmy Wayne was a foster kid, and so he, I don't know if you've ever read the book, Walk to Beautiful. If you have a chance, read it. It's a great read. He was a foster kid and understands all the challenges that they face. And so he was able to help change the legislation. So we actually serve children up to the age of 21. So newborn children to age 21. This letter behind me was literally written by a child who needed to be in a foster home and ultimately ended up in one. But that's frequently their wish list. That's their Christmas list. Just imagine. It gives me chills every time I think about it. There's just so much abuse, neglect. It's just, it's tragic. So how do we help? So, we're the little train that could. We're just a small organization. Every single penny goes to Love on Wheels, goes to the foster kids. Nothing goes to administrative. It's all volunteers. But we provide, like I said, diaper bags, backpacks, suitcases, all full of basic necessities. The average amount of time that kids go to school without underwear is 3 weeks. 3 weeks, no underwear, okay? So this is basic stuff, So we're trying so hard to, provide them with just the basic necessities so that when they do have to go to a new school, they're not worried, oh my gosh, I don't have on underwear, Small things like that can make a huge difference. So each bag has a blanket. For all of you who've ever heard of No-Sew Throws, or you can go to our website and look up on YouTube. These kids are carrying around these No-Sew Throws for years, and they love them. And we even have ladies in Crossville that make them handmade quilts. I mean, it's amazing. We have a local writer in Nashville who wrote the book, Never Lose Heart. She felt like God was showing her all these hearts in nature, reminding her, because she was going through a very difficult period in her life, and she started taking pictures of these hearts in nature and ended up compiling a book. about how God reminds us that he's here and never lose heart. And so every child over the age of 11 gets that book. Please support her. Her name is Connie Smith, and again, neverloseheart.com. Love notes. Every child receives a love note written either by the same age child as that child. It's a note of encouragement. Or adults can write notes for children who can't read yet. Or again, we serve children up to age 21. So those love notes, we're told again and again that these kids are carrying on to them for years. So it's just little things like that we're trying to do to try to lift them up. So the vision of Love on Wheels, it's certainly to provide all these essential necessities, but it's also to remind them that they are loved, they are deserving, their possessions have value, they have value. But it's also just to inspire a dialogue about the foster care system in general, because I feel like most people don't know that most of our kids are walking around with trash bags with their things in it. And most people don't know that there is an extreme need for foster parents. So let's talk about it. Talk about it with your friends. Tell your friends what you learned today, and help us to make a change. I hope that we can somehow. There are other organizations that do similar things. I'm hoping that someday this will be the norm, and every kid will get what they need. And again, inspiring the creation of foster families, because that's critical, especially good ones. So luckily we started with a few major contributors, but little by little I'm being invited like I was today. Again, we appreciate it so much. Just going from church to church and spreading this word and helping these kids. So how can you help? Donations of any kind, monetary, go to Dollar Tree. The Dollar Tree is amazing. I mean, when I go to the Dollar Tree, I usually go by myself, and I've got like 4 carts loaded like this. And we can fill so many bags with stuff from Dollar Tree. You can go online. Emily's got all that information. Follow us on Facebook. Write love notes. Have a wine and cheese party and make no-so throws or love notes. We were already given an amazingly large bag of stuff today for some precious children are going to absolutely love, and you wouldn't believe the love notes that came in today from you guys. Thank you so much. Again, every little thing like that just takes us a few minutes can really make a difference. A lot of churches have fundraisers where they ask everyone to, just bring in a pair of underwear the size you wear, because our biggest need is large size underwear. So I ask churches to ask people to, bring our own sizes in so that we get a nice distribution of sizes. So again, how to get involved, just, follow us on Facebook, get on the website and do exactly what you're doing today. Thank you so much for inviting us. Thank you so much for your heart for foster children. These kids are so deserving, and they're in this situation for no fault of their own, truly. And they really deserve our love. So thank you again so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Can we thank Dr. Kunkel for being here and for all the work she's doing? That's something near and dear to our hearts, so thank you so much. And thank you for those of you who have already started donating. Do I have that clicker? Do you still have that clicker? Can I borrow that? Thank you. How's everybody doing? All right, good. So glad to see those of you in the room. Glad to see those of you who are joining us online. We're in a series of sermons, teachings, talks, rants, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, where we're going through the signs and wonders that Jesus performs in the Gospel of John. And we've been taking it bit by bit. Today, though, I want to combine 2 of them. So today, we've looked at the first 3 in separate weeks. And today, I want to look at signs 4 and 5 together, because they really do go together. And the way these signs have worked is generally there's the sign, so like Jesus turns water into wine, and then there's sort of the event that helps interpret it, which is in John, it's Jesus turns water into wine, he goes into the temple and does this thing, right? And then there's Jesus does another thing, and then there's another event, and then he meets a woman at a well, and then he does this other thing. And so there's all this stuff, and it's starting to build. And when we come to John chapter 6, we actually get 2 signs Jesus performs. And here's the way I want to walk through this today. I'm going to be honest, there's a little bit of text to read through, but I'm going to take the approach of, you know those buses you get on and they drive you around, you get to stare at other people's houses? How many know what I'm talking about? Like celebrity buses? I'm just going to do that with the Bible with you today. So I'm just going to kind of meander through the text. I'll make comments, and then when we get through the stories, I'll just try to kind of wrap that up with, here's what I think is going on there. Okay, and these stories, if you've been around the Bible, these stories are probably going to be really familiar. This is really the only direct, almost one-to-one story that is in the Gospel of John that's found in the other 3 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They really don't have a lot of overlap, but this is a story of overlap. So we'll begin in John chapter 6, verse 1. After this, Jesus went across the Galilee Sea, that is the Tiberias Sea. A large crowd followed him because they had seen the miraculous signs. Again, if you've been with us, the word miraculous is actually not in the text. This is something the translators throw in. They saw the signs he had done among the sick. Jesus went up a mountain and sat there with his disciples. It was nearly time for Passover, the Jewish festival. Now, I really do think when we're given that sort of detail in John, we're supposed to understand that this detail matters. Right? John's very meticulous. John is telling a story, and if you remember the story John is telling, John says at the end, I could have told you about so many other things Jesus said and did, but I didn't tell you about those things. I only told you about these things because I wanted you to see this Jesus, to see the life that is found in this Jesus, and I wanted you to trust this Jesus and receive the life that Jesus brings, right? John is essentially saying, for me and my community, we have found life in Jesus that has transformed us. And so John is inviting us to see it. Now, why does it matter that we're at Passover? Well, Passover festival that remembers the Exodus from Egypt. And if you don't know that story, long, long time ago, the Israelites were slaves in Egypt. They were enslaved by the Egyptian Empire. And God raised up this leader, this prophet named Charlton Heston, I believe it was, who there's going to come a point when that joke no longer works because people are not going to know who he is or what that movie was. But until then, I'm going to get every single ounce I can out of it. God raises up this prophet called Moses, and Moses comes and he brings this message of liberation, and the people ultimately are liberated. Now, it wasn't easy, and there's a whole lot that happens in that story, and there's some of it that's problematic that we should be like, ugh. But the reality is that there's this enslavement, and then God raises up a prophet named Moses, and Moses goes and liberates the people, and they actually leave Egypt, and they come to a body of water, and they can't go through it, and Pharaoh's army is chasing them, and then the sea just parts, and they walk right across. Like, this is a big, so Passover is a freedom festival. It is a liberation festival. It is a time to remember that our ancestors were enslaved by at the time, the largest empire the world had seen. And that in our enslavement, God heard the cry. In our oppression, God heard the cry, and God acted to deliver us. Now, why might this festival be a tense, frustrating time in the first century world of Jesus? Because the Jewish people are still oppressed. This time it's not Egypt, it's Rome. In between Egypt and Rome, there has been empire after empire after empire who's essentially run roughshod over the people, controlled their territory, and done whatever they wanted. And in the day of Jesus, you have people who around Passover would begin wondering, if God did it then, is it possible that God might act to bring us freedom again? So you can imagine the tension, especially when you have people who disagree on how do we stand up to the empire. Some people say, well, we should take the path of nonviolence because if we take up weapons against the empire, we're going to get crushed. But you had others who said, we can kill our way to peace. We can kill our way to liberation. And they tried in the year 70, and it failed. But you can see this context, Passover, a tense time, a time of remembering liberation, a time of remembering that way, way back in our story, our ancestors had this story about how God brought them out of captivity, and maybe, just maybe, God will bring us to liberation again. Jesus looked up and saw the large crowd coming toward him. He asked Philip, "Where will we buy food to feed these people?" Here's what I love about Jesus, because most people, that would not have been my first question. My first thing would be like, look at all these people, right? Which you can tell personality types, right? My personality type is, look, people, let's go talk to them. Jesus is like, where are we going to get the food for this? Now, in Jesus' defense, he's actually in John. Again, John is working at a very non-literal level. In John, Jesus is inviting the disciples into a conversation because he wants them to see something. Where are we going to get food enough to feed all of these people? Jesus said this to test him, for he already knew what he was going to do. Philip replied, more than a half year's salary worth of food wouldn't be enough for each person to have even a little bit. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said, a youth here has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what good is that for a crowd like this? A youth here has like a number 6 from Long John Silver's. Like, there are lots of people. We find out 5,000 in the ancient world, patriarchy, they only counted men. So you're dealing with way over 5,000 people here. And this kid's got like, well, I got some barley loaves and a couple of fish. What do you do with that? And it's one of those things, I bet, like, how did they find out the kid even had it? Right? And again, I don't think this story is operating at a very literal level, but I think it is really helpful to enter into the story and allow our imagination to run a little bit wild with it, because I think that's what the point is, to enter into the story. How did they find out? Did they just kind of go scanning the crowd to see who had what, or did this kid just bring it up and say, I've got this? Because in the ancient world, in the first century, you would travel, if you were going a distance, you would travel with a basket of food because you never knew where you'd be, and you know, there wasn't always a McDonald's on every corner in the first century. There were only a few of them, and there weren't a billion served yet. And so you end up in this story of this young boy bringing this and offering what he has. What is that for a crowd like this? Like, here's what we have to offer, but it's pitiful. Here's what we have to offer, but it's just not enough. Here's what we're bringing to the table, and compared to the ask, and compared to the challenge, and compared to what is in front of us, what we're bringing to the table, it seems almost embarrassing to even put it out there. You ever been in a situation where you felt that way about anything? Like, you ever been one of those places where you're at a party and you bring a gift that you think is okay, but then they open every gift in front of you and they got like a new car and like a Disney vacation, and you're like, oh, so I guess like a month of Netflix wasn't really what they were looking for. I guess what I'm bringing to the table just isn't going to be enough. And there's this embarrassment that comes with it, and this futility, this feeling of futility, and this feeling of like, gosh, what's the point? And Jesus does not really, like, he doesn't bat an eye on this. He doesn't, yeah, that's not very much. We should keep looking. Surely somebody else has something. Jesus just notices there's a lot of grass. And they have everybody sit down, about 5,000 of them, plus women and children. And then, I love Jesus' initial response. What good is that? Well, just have the people sit down. Who knows how good it is, but just have the people sit down. And once the people sit down, we'll see. And he takes the bread, and he gave thanks, and he distributed it to those who were sitting there. He did the same with the fish, each getting as much as they wanted. When they had plenty to eat, he said to the disciples, gather up the leftover pieces so that nothing will be wasted. So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the little pieces of 5 barley loaves that had been left over by those who had eaten. One of the details in the story that I never noticed, and I was giving, not on this, it was one of the other Gospels, I was using the text there, but I was giving a talk on this, and somebody in the community I was speaking with, at one point we were having a discussion, and they raised their hand, and she pointed out to me that, you know, they all traveled with baskets, and the disciples there were 12 disciples, there were 12 baskets. They had baskets. They had baskets. They collected the leftover stuff. Like, why were they not maybe sharing what was in their baskets? Is it possible that they had nothing in their basket? Is it possible their basket was full and they just didn't want to open it up to others? And Jesus does this thing, and they pick up 12 baskets, which is symbolic, of course, of Israel sort of being reconstituted in the work of Jesus. When the people saw that he had done a miraculous sign, they said, "This is truly the prophet who was coming into the world." Jesus understood that they were about to come and force him to be their king, so he took refuge again, alone on a mountain. You want to talk about popularity? You do a thing and people are like, "You are now president," immediately. And by the way, if that ever happens to you, do what Jesus did. You do not want that job, right? Run away. And Jesus does. There's this, we're at Passover. It's a freedom festival. Hey, it's a freedom festival. We've got a guy over here doing prophet-like things. This could be the person to lead us against the Romans. Let's make him our king and let's go get him. If he can multiply bread and fish, and if he can heal sicknesses, then why can't he defeat the Romans? And Jesus bails out on this, and he goes to an alone place. It's interesting throughout all the Gospels, which gives me like this insistence that it's a historical thread of truth about who Jesus was. That every time his popularity began to build, Jesus like bails. He hits 5,000 friends on Facebook and he shuts down his account. He goes viral on Twitter and he deletes his account. Right? It's interesting that the bigger it starts getting, Jesus starts pulling back and going into deserted, lonely places and places to think, places to meditate, places to practice silence and just being, which is important because if you know this, there are moments when the demands become so high, even if it's good stuff, even if it's people and you love what you're giving into the world, there are moments when you just have to shut it down and say, I have, like this day, I have nothing left to give. When we were in Disney a few weeks ago, we had tickets for something every day. And on Thursday, we had tickets to Universal Studios, and we really wanted to go, but we were also exhausted, and we just shut it down. And it actually enabled us to enjoy the rest of the trip a little bit more. There's something about shutting it down that gives you the energy to keep going at the next leg of whatever the next thing is. And so Jesus goes away to a lonely place. When evening came, Jesus' disciples went down to the lake. They got into a boat and were crossing the lake to Capernaum. It was already getting dark, and Jesus hadn't come to them yet. The water was getting rough because a strong wind was blowing. When the wind had driven them out for about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the water. He was approaching the boat, and they were afraid. So, by the way, often what happens when you read a text like this, if you you'll find people going, well, here's how it could have happened. You have different groups. You have people going like, well, Jesus just walked on water because he was God and he can do whatever he wants. Okay, but let's just take that off the table. Well, maybe there was this tide thing where there was a sandbar and it looked like he was walking on water. Y'all, I think if we end up there, we are missing what John is doing. We are missing it. John is not trying to get us to figure out how a human being might become so buoyant that they can walk on water. John is inviting us to see something else. And notice Jesus' response to them. He approached the boat and they were afraid. He said to them, I am. Don't be afraid. Now, some translations muddy this. This translation does it well. Some translations go, hey, it's me. No, that's not what he says here. He says, I am. And if you're familiar with the Jewish tradition, I am is what? It's the name of God revealed to Moses at the burning bush, right? Take your shoes off, bush is on fire. Who's sending me to Egypt? I am. Now, again, I don't think it's very likely that in the first century, Jesus would have referred to himself this way. And it's even more unlikely that if he had, anybody would have followed him. This would have been considered blasphemous in the first century. But I think what we're seeing here is this community of people who had found in Jesus, in the life of Jesus, in the meaning of Jesus, they had connected with the meaning of God. So much so that they would later write in this gospel, if you have seen Jesus, you have seen God. That is who Jesus is for us. Jesus is a place where we have touched and experienced the sacred. It is a place where we've touched and experienced the creative energy that undergirds and supports and sustains all things. In Jesus, we touch a kind of life that is bigger than just what one human being's life in their body could possibly be. And Jesus says this, I am, don't be afraid. They wanted to take him in the boat, and then the boat reached land where they had been heading. There's some really interesting work scholars have done on this, and they think that this text actually, maybe originally, might have been meant to be a resurrection story. The disciples, after Jesus' death, they go back fishing, which is what happens later in John. They've been fishing all night, there's nothing. In this story, they're fishing out on a boat, or they're in a boat, and there's a big storm, and they're scared and they're terrified because Jesus is no longer with them. And yet, in that moment of fear, what they experience is that Jesus is still with them. And maybe you buy that and maybe you don't, but I think we can at least see the foreshadowing of some of this going on in this story. So what actually might be going on? What if the signs all point to something? And if the signs are pointing us to abundant, full life, right? That we may experience this life in Jesus and that we have trust in that life. What are we being invited to see? I think it's important to remember the details. When is this happening? It's happening at Passover. What is involved? Bread and water. By the way, after this, later in John chapter 6, that Jesus, there's no Eucharist, there's no communion, there's no Last Supper in John. It actually takes place in John chapter 6, because John just does everything different. And in that story, Jesus says to them, like, everybody loves him. And while at the height of his popularity, he goes, well, if you really want to follow me, you have to eat my flesh and drink my blood. And then everybody bails out. And he loses followers to such an extent, he looks at the people around him going, are you going to bail too? Are you leaving too? And of course, he's not talking literal. This is all metaphorical language. But it also shows when you take metaphorical language literally, you miss it. You miss it. So what might be going on? I think we have to do two things. I think this sign points backward before it points forward. I feel like the scarecrow right now in Wizard of Oz. This sign points backward before this sign points forward. So let's talk about the backward. What story about bread is central to the Passover narrative? Well, this idea of manna, and if you're not familiar with the story, when the Israelites are freed from their bondage in Egypt, they end up wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, and they get a bit hungry, like you do on an endless road trip. And so they start complaining to Moses, you brought us out here. We had food in Egypt. We had plenty of food in Egypt. We were well taken care of food-wise in Egypt. And you brought us out here in the desert, and now we're starving to death. And so the solution to this is God is going to provide them bread from heaven every day. And they're not allowed to gather up, except on the day before the Sabbath, they can gather extra. Generally, you get all you need, you get bread for today, and you bring it in, and then tomorrow you trust that there'll be bread for that day. Does it seem like Jesus may have been formed by this tradition a little bit? Give us today our daily bread. So this idea of manna, this bread, and manna in Hebrew literally means, what is it? Have you ever slaved over, those of you with kids, have you ever worked so hard over preparing a meal and you put it down before your kids and they go, what is it? It's a chicken thing. Literally happened last week. Literally happened to me last week. I had the task of putting the chicken in the crock pot, and I did it, and I put it on their plates at the end of the day, and they looked at me and they said, what is it? And I literally had no idea. I don't know what I prepared. Well, it's got chicken. There's some kind of soup in there. And what? Oh, stovetop stuffing. It was a whole thing. Smelled great. Had no idea if I'd done it correctly. And I slop it out on their plate, and they're all like, what is it? It's not steak. Well, no, it's not steak. It's chicken thing. It's chicken thing, and it's delicious. And they all loved chicken thing. But there's this human experience. Thanks, those of you laughing, thank you. It's probably your first time here, and I'm so glad that you're enjoying it. Everybody else is like, God, would you stop? But this, what is it? What is it? What is this? What is this? It's just showing up, what is this? What is this? And this manna was the thing that sustained them during this period of wandering. And then what about water? Well, there's this whole moment when Pharaoh's army is bearing down on them. And the seas part. And they walk through on dry ground. Could it be that what John is pointing toward when he points backward is that he's trying to say to us, do you know who Jesus is? Jesus is Moses 2.0. And if Jesus is Moses 2.0, Jesus is a prophet 2.0, leading us on an Exodus 2.0 so that we can experience liberation 2.0. Jesus and Moses are, in John, linked together. He wants us to see that what's happening in Jesus, they believe, is not a deviation from their story. It is not a swerve. It is not a new religion. It is not a new faith. It is not leaving behind Judaism for something else. They weren't having meetings like, hey, we're starting a new thing called Christianity. Who wants to sign up? No. This is Jesus stepping into his faith tradition, and John putting the symbols of that faith tradition around Jesus to say, this is who this person is, and this is what we've experienced in his life. And signs are pointing to the full and abundant life they'd found in Jesus. So when we talk about going forward, what do the signs point toward? Well, remember, manna was bread for today. Bread for today. And what does Jesus do when there's more people than there is food? He says, let's sit them down. Let's get them organized. I'll never forget when I was just beginning as a pastor. I was pastoring full time, but my faith was unraveling, and I could no longer take certain things literally. But I had not thought about this story, and we ended up visiting. We went to Gatlinburg with some of my family that I don't see very much, and I ended up in a car with an uncle and aunt who I really hadn't seen in years. And I'm driving, and I can't remember if you were in there with me or not. I think you were. And we were driving, and they started talking about, yeah, we just moved to this town, and we've been looking for a church. And we went to this one church, and you will not believe the crazy thing they said. They said that Jesus, in the story of feeding the 5,000, that wasn't a literal story, that Jesus was trying to teach us that if everybody shares what they have, we'll all have enough. He's like, can you believe that? And I went, that's what it is. He had no idea. And I should send him an edible arrangement because he still has no idea. That was so helpful to me in this journey because it unlocked for me, oh my gosh, that's exactly what this story is about. This story is saying that if you want to experience abundant life, you do not do that by holding it all in and clutching it all together and holding it so tightly that it begins squishing through your fingers. If you want to experience abundant life, sit down in groups and everybody bring what they have to the table. And if everybody brings what they have, then everybody has enough. Scarcity is not grounded in the divine. It is not grounded in the human. Scarcity is grounded in the subhuman. Scarcity is not what human beings do. Scarcity is what human beings do when we forget that we're human beings. When we forget that we are all, whether we like it or not, so deeply and intricately connected to one another. And just think about the world right now as it stands with the effects of climate change. Climate change will affect everybody regardless of how much money you have. It will affect the poor more disproportionately. Of course, everything will. But the fact is we all live on this blue dot, hurtling through the solar system. And if this blue dot ceases to be a blue dot, we all cease. We are intricately connected to one another. And Jesus is teaching his disciples that the best way to be human, the human way to be human, is to open your basket and to bring what you have to share. And when everybody else does that, then everybody has a pretty feeling meal. I think that's what the early church was. I think this is why in the early church, when Paul in 1 Corinthians 11 gets so angry at them for their disruption of the Lord's Supper, he essentially says, you're coming together and the wealthy are eating the good stuff and all the stuff and getting drunk. And when those who are having to work or when people who are owned by other human beings and they get a few minutes away, they come and they get nothing. He says, this is not what Jesus taught us. Jesus taught us we all bring our baskets and we open them up. And in the sharing of that food, in the sharing of our resources, in the sharing of our money, in the sharing of our kindness, in the act of generosity, we experience full and abundant life. I've never met a person who gave something generously to somebody else and who went, that was terrible. I will never do that again. But we've so bought into a scarcity narrative that if I don't keep everything, then there won't be enough for me. When apparently what Jesus is saying, no, if we all open up, everybody has enough. Life is found not through hoarding and through scarcity, but life is found through generosity. And then I think he's talking in the water, the walking of water. I think part of the meaning of this is life is about liberation. Full and abundant life leads to liberation. And for Jesus' disciples in this story, I think it's multi-layered. I think it's talking about being liberated from fear. right? They're in this boat and they're terrified. And Jesus comes to them walking on water, which is great. Like, oh, Moses had to part the sea to go through it? Watch this, right? I don't part the water, I walk on top of it, right? Just profound, beautiful, sort of symbolic, like Moses did this, but look at this. Look at this. I think part of what we're being told, he tells the disciples, don't be afraid, I am. I am. And, I think that what would be great is if somebody made a bumper sticker that said, I am, and parenthetically it says, and so are you. I am. So are you. Jesus is bringing a life that liberates us from fear. Because fear is the thing that drives all of our worst characteristics. Fear is what drives stinginess and scarcity. Fear is what drives us to hate people we don't even know. Fear is what drives us to be afraid of people who have a different passport than we have. Fear is what drives us to have to shout out loud, this is the best country that's ever country. Like, who are you trying to prove that to? Fear is the engine of all the ugliness throughout human history. And Jesus comes to bring us a life that liberates us from that fear. And I think Jesus ultimately is trying to liberate us as human beings in every single way. I think we're being invited to see that anything that oppresses us, there is a life that can liberate us. Because you know why people oppress other people? It's out of fear. It's out of fear. Go to the book of Exodus, and it begins with the Pharaoh going, gosh, if there end up being more of them than there are of us, we're in trouble. We should enslave them. Fear. And when the shackles of fear are broken, you can begin to live a full and abundant and free life. And the truth is, I don't know that ever happens completely for us. And I'm sure there are. I know there are some people who probably are just so evolved that spiritually maybe that they just live without fear all the time. But there are moments in my life when I see it. Right? When I think, gosh, there's a moment I would have been afraid of that person. There's a moment when I would have been afraid of that thing. There's a moment when I would have had all this fear. And so while we were at Disney a couple weeks ago, we have a 5-year-old daughter who'd never been in a theme park in her life. And she was just a complete, she was just addicted to adrenaline. She loved it. She was and I'm terrified of heights. I don't like roller coasters. I don't know why you would put yourself, do not test the fates. Why are we doing this to each other? And so she ends up getting on every ride, right? And she loves it, and so I feel called out by that. And so I decide she wants me to start riding things with her, and so I'm like, well, I'm not going to sit back and let my 5-year-old do it while I sit over there and do this. And so we end up on this thing called the Tower of Terror. How many of you have ever been on the Tower of Terror? So we're on this thing, and we're sitting there in this elevator of death. And I'm with our 5-year-old's here, our oldest Cohen is here with me. Carla had already ridden it with them, and they came back. Dad, you have to ride it, it's awesome. What do you say then? No, I'm scared. So I end up in this thing, and the point of the ride, spoiler alert, is it takes you up and down, it drops you, and so all you have is a lap belt. And so as we were dropping up and down, I was holding on like this so I wouldn't come off the seat as little as possible. And at the end, we get off the ride, and of course, Cohen at one point says, hey, are you okay? While we're going up and down, I'm like, yes, this is awesome. I love it. And so finally, when we get off the ride, we come to the bank of monitors where all the pictures are. And there's a picture, and it's me and my daughter, Jalen, with her hands in the air, raised off the seat, sheer delight on her face. And I'm like, I want to be that. I want to be that on a roller coaster, and I want to be that with my neighbor. And I want to be that with my kids, and I want to be that with my enemy. I want to be liberated from the fear of me, from the fear of you, from the fear of people who are different than I am, who see the world differently than I do. I want to be liberated from fear. And I think that what John is saying for these people, and there are other people who maybe have found other meaningful paths to do that, of course. But John is saying for our community, We felt like we were in the boat in the middle of the night in the waves, and it was terrifying. And then we heard a familiar voice say, "It's okay. I am. And so are you. So come with me." And John is saying, if you want to be liberated from fear, for us, this life of Jesus has done it. And for me, that's what's happening in my own life and heart, I hope. That the story of Jesus isn't making me more fearful and more boundaried and more resistant to other people and ideas. It's actually opening me up and realizing that the seatbelt will hold. So if we're hurtling toward the bottom of the shaft at what felt like 3,000 miles an hour, you are safe to hold up your hands. Are you with me, Grace Point? All right. Let's pray together, shall we? God, for this life we see in this Jesus, for this life that calls us beyond scarcity and beyond stinginess, this life that calls us beyond our boundaries and tribalisms, our desires to keep people at a distance, and instead it calls us to open our hands and open our baskets and open our hearts. This Jesus who calls us to the path of liberation from our fears, from our need to harm other people, to feel good, from our need of keeping other people down, to feel like we've been raised up. We long for that liberation. In a world around us that it seems fear of the other, fear of someone different, fear of losing our rights is the thing that's driving the bus. And we long for this hope and this joy and this trust that we don't have to hold on to the seat, that we can throw our arms above our heads with reckless abandon and just enjoy the ride, because there's enough. There's enough. We are enough. We are enough. There is enough. So give us this day our daily bread. And we're very grateful. And everybody said, Amen.
My feet are strong, my eyes are clear, I cannot see the way from here, but on we go. God knows the way, and in her arms she keeps me safe. Fear not, keep on, watch and pray, walk in the light of God's highway. The shadows flee, the valley is deep, but evil cannot conquer me. Your rod and your staff, they protect me. You give me rest, you give me peace. Fear not, keep on, watch and pray, walk in
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily. I'm on the LC here at Grace Point, and I'm here because I'm going to be introducing Jeff in a second. He's here to do an ordination ceremony for Josh, and the reason I wanted to be a part of it when Jeff asked me is because I think, on a personal note, what I love about Josh is that he embraces the Bible and love versus the Bible instead of love. And I think he is an incredible model for many pastors and leaders and faith leaders who might be struggling to do that. And that's why I support this, and that's why the LC also supports this. Jeff, has also been a faith leader for many years. He is the CEO and producer of the Wild Goose Festival. He's been with Grace Point since 2015, and he has been a past member of the Leadership Council as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
So our church, Grace Point Church, from the bold days of our founding pastor, Stan Mitchell, up through this particular minute here, is and will be literally leading the world into an embracement of a new faith. I don't know if all of you quite know that or realize that, but this particular collection, this particular congregation has, for whatever reason, been set in a space to where that we're impacting dramatically through this gathering and through our online participation, but through the kinds of things we've been doing for a number of years here. So we're actually leaning into the creation of the future of faith, a faith of inclusion and a faith of community, a faith of spirit. And I like to say a lot around spirit, and I like what Josh had to say today. I like to say that I was before I am and I will be after I'm not. And I like that whenever Jesus says I am, and Josh under my breath, and I would say, and you are too. And you said, and you are too. And you are too. And you are too. And we all are. And the Spirit is not only in us, the Spirit is between us. And so this is the faith we're leaning into in the future. Now, I want to say to you, the bold and beautiful and the hopefully at times uncomfortable, because that ought to be the case, where being uncomfortable can actually be comforting. Welcome to Grace Point, if you're new. But I also want to say welcome to the home of our defrocked pastor. See, I would like to go a little more tribal here and say, could I get a witness for defrocked here? Because do we have any other ministers in here that wants to get defrocked? If you're frocked, you ought to get defrocked because you're not doing it right, okay? Can I get some help? Huh? Yeah, Josh is defrocked. Now, I got to confess to you, I don't actually know what frocked means. But I know that whatever frocked means, Josh has had it removed. So today we're gathering to put it back, sort of, maybe. Now, why am I saying sort of or maybe? Well, because in our role in this online and local gathering, and in the leadership role we've been given, we're challenged to leave some things behind. And we're challenged to take some things with us. And we're challenged to reframe some other things. Problem is we don't know which thing ought to be left, which thing ought to be taken, which thing ought to be reframed. So, at least for me, what I'm doing in my life at this season is I'm holding lots of things very, very loosely. I don't know entirely whether being frocked matters that much, but it seems to some folk, and it sort of does to me, though I can't defend it or define it. So we just want to make sure that we understand that we're doing something that may be more useful or less useful, but we're going to hold it loosely and in love. For me, holding things loosely has enabled my faith to evolve in ways that letting it go does not require my spirit to be broken. And I know for many of us in here, that's been our experience. There were times where letting it go hurt. You know, my Aunt Martha was a wonderful, sweet woman, and I don't even know what it meant that she, as she put it, prayed me through. I don't know if any of you all have folk in your family that would pray you through. I sort of had like a whole division of my family whose job was just praying me through, because apparently I got into a lot of places I needed to get through. And Aunt Martha was a very good and wonderful woman. And I don't believe her at all anymore, right? But I don't have any need to redefine my life in a way to where I have to discuss whether or not Aunt Martha was right or wrong. It's just not on my table. So as we go forward, and you may not choose to do this, but as we go forward, holding our things a little loosely can let us let them go, but somehow or the other not have to go through the pain of what many of us have experienced with deconstruction, because it was very, very difficult for some of us. In fact, I brought my notes today in a book written by Brian McLaren. Brian had a big role in mine, but I also brought it in Brian's book, Josh, because I know how important Brian's been in your life. And he has one title that's a couple of titles old called The Great Spiritual Migration. And the premise behind this is that our role in life is basically migratory. We're always moving. And I was always kind of taught there was a destination, and somehow or the other, I was always missing the mark. But it did give us a lot to do at summer revival time, because Aunt Martha was praying me through, and there was always the possibility we'd have a big meeting down in the altar. So I've been there. I want to hold it loosely enough to where it won't break my spirit. So we come today perhaps in the reframed spirit to ordain Josh Scott. I have to also tell you that the rebel in me, which was born decades ago and refreshed by the hope I see and experience in you all, I may prefer to say that we've come today to celebrate the defrocking of our pastor. So to paraphrase Josh's comments from last week, he said, when clergy, that means frocked people. I know that much about frocked, it's clergy. When clergy ask the wrong questions, then the institution, in the interest of managing its borders, rears its head. I want no spiritual borders to measure my beliefs or to chastise my unbeliefs. And I think that's the direction we all are hoping toward. So I challenge us as we grow forward that we consciously, now listen to this, folks. We've got to consciously resist being a new generation of kinder, gentler, more affirming border guards ourselves. We'll just be in the same place. So, Josh, would you please step up here? I've known Josh a while, and I was on the leadership group that was that recruited him. We would say in the other world, called. Yeah. We recruited him, and I will say this with deference, though she's not coming on the stage, but the night that we had dinner with you and Carla, and you described your life and your soul and your spirit, and described your family and all of those kinds of things, I turned to Jason, who was sitting next to me, and said, I felt a strong need to take off my shoes because I really felt that we were in a very unique and special place. And the irony of that recruiting attempt is he told us no. And I'm like, well, geez, we're going here, the spirit is moving, I want to take off my shoes and like dance on it or something like that, I'm ready to go. And he said, nah. Yeah. That's literally true. That kind of reminds me like today when you did Yeah. Did anybody else, like, I wrote down I don't even know how to write down, but he said that today in reference to something from the Exodus, I think. That'll get you defrocked. If you need to like you could do that. You could write a book on the things you can't say and stay frocked. Just don't say that'll screw you up, man. You're in deep trouble. So Josh, take just a second and tell us how we've ended up here, please.
Yeah, so I had been a pastor for 20-some years now, and I was pastoring a church in Morgantown, Kentucky. I'd been there for total of 14 years. When Grace Point reached out, I knew Grace Point. We were familiar, had a lot of friends here. And in that first meeting, the very first meeting, we actually had 2 meetings. One was the first one, and I just sort of said, it's just not the right time for us. And then we came back around and had another meeting, and we said, no, it's just not the right time for us. And there was a moment in February of 2019 when and I don't know, Carla the whole time had been like, just say yes. Just say yes. I was going, I don't know. I just didn't feel released. And then there was this moment, I can't remember what happened or why. It was February 2019, and I just had this sense, and I just looked over at Carla and said, I wonder what's happening at Grace Point. And so I literally had texted somebody and said, hey, what's going on at Grace Point? Just had you all in my mind. And like that night, it was a very quick process after that, because there was something in me that just realized that whatever I had to I felt very responsible for this other thing that I'd led down this journey. And so I think by that point we had it in a space where I felt like I'm going to hand this off now because I can do nothing else. This is no longer my thing. I just felt this sense of release. And then from the moment I stepped in here at Grace Point, it just felt like such the right fit.
My dancing was actually on target, on time. You just screwed up.
I just screwed it up.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just a few months delayed is all it was.
Okay. Go ahead.
And I've been here for, it'll be 3 years in April.
Yeah.
My first Sunday was on Easter. Who picks that?
Yeah. Yeah, I know
Like
that.
the big day,
Yeah.
when there's already pressure. Like, who's like, let me make it my first day. And people
Yeah,
will look back
I
on
thought
this and
that
be
was
like,
good.
yeah, that didn't go well. We should have
Yeah,
known by his Easter's coming.
I do remember that well. So, you got a letter. Who sent you a letter?
So the
Is
church-
that how you do that? You get a letter?
Yeah, I got a letter in the
Did
mail.
they call you and interview you? And
No,
talk to you?
they didn't ask me any questions. So my home church that ordained me back in 2001, I got a letter from them that they'd had a church-wide meeting, reviewed my theology, I guess, it's out there, and decided that they voted like unanimously to remove my ordination. Now, to be fair, I hadn't been a Southern Baptist for like 15 years.
Yeah.
So I didn't consider it real.
Yeah.
Well, it's not my ordination. But the whole process just kind of stunk.
Yeah.
The way they went about it. And so we're here today because of symbolism matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, ordinarily in the process of something like this, we ask, one of the ways let me just back up. We're going to ask Josh a question, and then we're going to ask a question to all of you all, and as you feel willing and able, participate, and for the folks online and folks who perhaps will see this later might participate. And I want to say to the congregation, to the participants here, yes, of course, we're going to ask you, do you support Josh's leadership? But we're also wanting to know, and I'm not trying to get anybody to sign up. We're not going to send you like special cards and like torn pages out of Bibles to where you can give us more money or something. But there's a sense in which I see this as a bit of a process in which we're leaning together into the creation of something that will last a lot longer than I'm going to be here to watch physically. So Josh, knowing what you've known from years of leadership and knowing how much you don't know and not even knowing the scope and its impact, do you, Josh Scott, affirm your commitment, accept your responsibilities, and commit yourself to this role?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Josh. And now then to those gathered here and around other places. As you're willing and able, do you affirm Josh's leadership and celebrate our hopefulness together? Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
That does it. Thank you so much. Come in, man.
I will send you off with the words that I always send you off with, and that is, no matter who you are or where you are going, as you move on this earth and dance in this world, you get to function from approval and not for approval, because upon your creation, you were already pre-approved. See you at Disc Insider this afternoon.
Thank you all. You're dismissed.